Hello and welcome to Office Hours. If you're just joining us on YouTube, you can find out more about what we're doing at our website at officehours.global. You can use the Join Us link at the top of the page and join our wonderful community. Usually our show consists of a first hour that's questions and answers, anything about media or virtual events or the technology that supports both. During the week, we have a second hour that's focused on a particular subject, and we have a nice schedule on our website where you can see what we're talking about. Today, we're going to do 2 hours of questions and answers. So we have lots of time. We have a great panel to answer your questions that have unique interests and specialities. So please provide our questions to take advantage of our community. Kent Jones is graciously volunteered to read. Ken, what do our producers want us to answer for them?
Well, good day, Josh, and everyone. It's nice to be here and nice to see and hear everyone. The first question that I have on deck here, it comes from TJ Asher in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And he says, I saw a podcast where a guest had a mic with a clamshell device around it. What is the purpose of such a device? And he gives us a web link with an image of it.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I don't know if our graphics has the image of that. If not, I can cut to it here. That's what we're talking about there. I would think that is designed to change the pattern of the microphone to absorb reflections from the rest of the room, because it's padded on the inside and steel with some kind of louvers, it looks like, on the outside. So that's my guess. I've never seen it. I would think that would drastically change the pattern of the microphone, which may not be good because a lot of times they use vents on the side of the microphone for off-axis cancellation and interference tube type microphones. That looks like maybe it's an end address cardioid microphone. I can't really see what it is there, but that's my guess as to what it's for. It's to prevent roominess of the room, reflections of the room, from getting into the backside of the microphone.
All right. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, exactly what Courtney said. I looked at it and I said, well, I think for about half the mics that I own, that would be a really bad idea. so I don't, but it'd be hard to tell. You'd have to test, but it's definitely not a one size fits all.
Mitchell?
Perhaps they want to hear the ocean in the background.
Yes.
Interesting. And Courtney, did you have another thought?
Yeah, typically you will see, I've never seen anything like that, but you'll see some wedge-shaped panels that go behind the microphone to prevent reflections from coming from behind. So you'll see two small, if you don't have a booth, it gives you the effect of removing some of the background reflections, but usually it's a couple of panels that go right behind the microphone, and the microphone is inside the panels there.
That could be a nice game for us. Put up various sorts of media paraphernalia and see who can guess what it's for.
Here's a question from me, Kenneth Jones in Seattle. Ken says, I understand that the new Rode Podcaster Pro 2 includes an Aphex channel. Could someone explain this circuitry's reputation in the industry?
Mitchell, I think you're a resident expert.
If Mickey is listening, I'm sure I'm going to hear from him while I'm saying this, but Aphex has been around a long time. They started out with the oral exciter, which was a mistake when he was building a Heathkit. But originally, the Aphex oral exciter was a device that was used by recording industries, and they had to rent it, by the way, at extremely expensive rates to enhance the high frequencies. It generated harmonics that were pleasing to the ear. Today, and as it relates to the Rode Podcaster, it's just a processing technology that the folks at Rode acquired the Aphex company, and they're just using that name and perhaps those algorithms. But generally speaking, Aphex processors like the Compeller, even the old Dominator, were very well respected in the industry as a great leveling device. I'm using an Aphex Channel right now, and I'm sure Mickey is getting ready to start a Kickstarter program to get it replaced with a MixPre.
Yeah, it's a brand new device. I'm sure with some upgrades and firmware upgrades that it'll be they'll be able to enhance its functionality even further.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana asks for our best recommendation for a mic to use in a mask. And he has a web link here in the question. One without an exhalation valve. He says, it's a moist to wet environment, and I'm worried about compromising the seal with a lav.
Courtney?
Well, I had this problem and approached it a different way. I printed out used my 3D printer, and the USC Keck Laboratories designed this mask off of 3D models of faces. And you can see it's got a dual stage filter. So it's got a filter in the back, which I put a HEPA filter in. That little thing is removable. And this front piece is removable, and I put a second HEPA filter there. And so to put a mic in it, you don't want the mic inside the mask itself, because then it's going to get spit on it, and to use an indelicate term, and also breath noise. It's going to be very breathy. So I took our friend, the old Pile little boom mic, and has a very narrow little steel wire that supports it. And so what I did is I took the mask and I cut a little slit in this outside piece right here, so it wouldn't compromise the inside integrity of the mask itself. And then I put the pile so it would go in the side here, and then I could put the outside filter on. So then the microphone is trapped between those two filters. So it works as a windscreen to keep your breath from popping on the microphone or for sounding every time you breathe in or out. And it keeps it from being contaminated because it's behind at least one HEPA filter. So it's between the two filters. So it keeps it isolated. And this 3D, I think you can find the forms for this, the files for this on Thingiverse, WM Keck COVID mask, if you want to print your own.
Fantastic. That looks great. Courtney, and is it specifically made to accommodate a microphone, or is that just due to the modifications? Oh, good work. Alex?
Yeah, I saw one person that we were working with had taken one of those masks, and they had cut a hole in the mask. So not in didn't try to put it underneath it. It actually went into a little hole which they had sealed with silicone. So they had it in there, and then what they did is they printed a little piece I think they were using a Countryman actually for what they were doing, and it went in, and they snapped it. You know, they had printed a little piece that had like the snap that you'd have for the Countryman inside, and that side they had pulled out a little bit so that it had a little bit of space. So the mic sat to the side. They had a fairly big mask, so there was a lot of space in front of it, and it sounded a little, when they talked, but it was really clear. It was probably the clearest of all of us that were on comms. Was this one person that had gone through the trouble? But they didn't try to go. The key was they didn't try to go under it specifically for the reason that you're talking about. They went through. They built a hole, and then they resealed that hole with silicone, and that seemed to work really well.
Yeah, it's. I wonder if we don't have the Tuesday amount of audio experts, but I wonder if there's particular filtering you can do to.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They just didn't have it, applied. You could definitely do, a variety of, pull. They could have done more EQ to pull a lot of the bass out of that, and it probably would have sounded a lot better.
I remember John Indelson did a project where they had divers with full face masks on, and the EQ that they did on that was amazing. In fact, I think they said they let it sound a little breathy just so that they would believe that they were under the water at the time.
Right.
So fantastic. Some pretty talented work.
John Foltz from Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania, comes in with a question. He says, I have a few Hyperdecks. I record sports. Does anyone know of a workflow to use a Hyperdeck as a replay device?
Okay, Mitchell, and then maybe Courtney.
I don't think it's really suited to replay, at least in its current incarnation. I was hoping that the Hyperdeck Shuttle, which is the latest version that Blackmagic has come out with, has a very nice shuttle wheel on it. But what you can't do is you can't top and tail the file after you've recorded it. And I think that's critical to doing a sports instant replay type scenario. However, I have been trying to twist Jonas's arm a little bit to get his great playout B to include the ability to control Hyperdeck shuttles, which would be interesting because then you could record and create a playlist, adjust the in and out points so it's appropriate for a playback. Like I said, it just isn't currently in its the way it is right now. Very good for recording something and quickly queuing up a segment of that recording and having a playback.
Got Courtney.
Yeah, exactly. Mitch covered most of the high points there. It's not really designed for recording and playing back at the same time. You have to switch modes between record and then playback and then choose the file and then play it back. And the way it does indexing is it puts all the files in a single timeline, which makes it a little bit tough every time you start and stop it. So every time you'd leave record to go play back something, it'd create a new file when you came back in. So it'd be very problematic as to how to find the file that has the segment in it you want to play back. And like Mitch said, it doesn't really do indexing. You know, to be an EVS system has the ability to just hit a button and capture a time code for a region of interest or a point of interest where you want to enter that video. So you can set playouts very easily from this time code to this time code and then go. And it still keeps recording while you're playing back. So it buffers everything into RAM and then off into the disk, and then it has the ability to continue recording in a continuous file as you go back into that same file that's still recording and play back segments out of it. So I don't think the Hyperdeck was ever designed to do that, and I don't think the Hyperdeck does variable speed playback out of the box, you know.
Yeah, there is a controller, I believe, that JL Cooper makes that will it will control it frame by frame, so you can use a jog and shuttle to kind of pass through things with a Hyperdeck. But it is not exactly what Courtney had mentioned, is that it doesn't it can't record and play at the same time, which is the key feature of an EVS, is being, because EVS is just constantly recording and then just setting in and out points and playback speed. So it's not stopping ever. It just has a separate read system, and so the EVS records its content in a very specific chunks fashion so that it can do that, and so it's a very specific format and so on and so forth. And so, like for instance, you can't typically copy files onto an EVS. You have to load them in because it has to build them in a certain way so that it can play them back that way. And so I don't think that the Hyperdeck is a really great way to do that. There are other things, less expensive things than EVSs, which started at like $80,000, are 3Play by NewTek, as well as mReplay by Softron. Those are mReplay is a software-based, Mac-based system that is designed for this kind of thing. So those are other options that are more built for what you do, that are less expensive than an EVS.
And Mitchell, do you want to weigh in again?
Yeah, the shame of it is that I think it can be done in software to a certain degree. The other point, in addition to setting an in and an out point using a shuttle wheel to get it queued up, is the ability to put markers in on the fly so you can hit key points of the particular video that you're shooting. Doesn't have that now, and that would be another piece you need.
Okay, John, looks like we've given you quite some options to test out.
Here's a question from Lois Richter in Davis, California. A Birding with Lois guest cannot make our regular showtime, but can record a segment with me earlier in a Zoom meeting. What's the easiest way to get two separate videos to be inputs in 090 later? I have two computers and could use Mac's Command-Shift-5. Ideas?
That's a good question there. Alex?
Yeah, I think that you can have, if you're trying to do it at home, you can have it be, our system should be able to record some stuff for you if you need to, because I think that trying to do this at home will be hard. You can have two separate computers, go full screen and capture those. But I think that trying to talk to JJ about it and figure out how we can help with that record would probably be the best way to do that, and find a time that we can do it, because I think that you want to have, in my opinion, external recorders that are going to pull those in, or I don't think that I would try to just do it with a couple laptops, in my opinion.
Okay. We'll have to give that a try, Lois, and tell us how that works.
Graham Caldwell in Belfast, Northern Ireland says, what would the panel recommend for a low-budget teleprompter for house of worship use? Announcements and so forth would be the main use. Talent about 6 feet from the camera. What size device is a good option? iPhone, iPad mini? Any good teleprompter apps?
All right. And before we get to our panelists, we have panelists waiting to answer your questions. We are running low on questions, and we have a nice long session to answer. I'm sure we could wax on about a few different topics, or if you'd like to take advantage of the knowledge here, feel free to submit your questions on our website. If you've never done so in the past, maybe today's the day we try out our Mukana system. Go ahead, Nigel.
Yes, I feel Courtney, who's next, probably should answer first. So I'll offer an appetizer and a amuse-bouche to what I'm sure is going to be a much better answer than I can give. But my advice, I tried doing a really simple one, like an iPad one, an iPhone one. It was far too small. iPad ones are still sort of medium size. In the end, what I use now is a fairly cheap piece of mirrored glass I got from Amazon in a little box. It works with a monitor. It's about 4 feet away from me. I use a 10-inch monitor or an iPad. I have to tell you, it's quite hard to read a lot of text off that. And so if what you really want to read, then you're probably going to have to do something bigger than an iPad, because 6 feet away for an iPad is going to be very big letters, which is going to be an interesting challenge, I suspect, for the person reading it and the operator. So 6 feet's quite a long way, and I'm sure Courtney can give you a better answer than that.
Sure. Courtney, what factors should we be considering on this problem?
I kind of hate the iPad-based ones because iPad doesn't have a file system that's easily accessible. So to make changes to it, you've got to email it or somehow run third-party software to expose the file system to be able to transfer files into it and out of it. And you can't edit easily on an iPad. You're better off to find a piece of prompting software, even free prompting software that runs on either a PC or a Mac, and use an external monitor. ICANN makes some fairly reasonably priced teleprompters, at least they used to, and prompter people make a couple of budget ones. They do make some that are designed for an iPad, but like I say, iPad doesn't make a very good prompter because, I mean, it's great if you write the stuff, you load it in, and you're going to scroll through it and never change it. But if it's someone for a house of worship who may be modifying their speech as they go along because they want to pre-record it or something, it's not live, then you want to have the ability to edit easily. If it's always going to be done live and it's going to be rehearsed, then you can go with the iPad type, but then you have to deal with how to control it. And there's some voice-operated ones I don't know. I don't think they work very well, but for reading through a speech that doesn't have a lot of duplication in it, it might work fine. Some of the iPad-based ones have a companion app that goes on an iPhone that lets you control the scrolling from your iPhone. So it gives you a portable wireless hand control so that the person reading could control it. So it depends on whether or not you're going to have a prompter operator or the person reading is going to be controlling their own scrolling. So the level of difficulty increases as you try and go controlling it yourself. So look around for different options there from the various choices. There are a lot of free teleprompter apps out there, and most of them are complete junk.
And Courtney, from about a 6-foot distance that our question has asked,
65
how do you factor in
type?
Okay. And if someone is maybe not as practiced at using a teleprompter, as many people aren't, do you recommend having a larger buffer, larger screen so that they can see more text?
That's problematic because, I wonder, you get above and below, wider, 16 by 9s monitors are a problem because then you get eye travel left and right. It looks like they're reading. So you want to keep the text as close in as possible. And as small. You can change the font size so you test it with that person's eyesight at the distance that they're at. And you change the font size to the point where they can read it, and you can put the most amount of text on the screen so that they can read, so it's not scrolling too fast, because when it's scrolling faster with a larger font on a small screen, if you're not setting the speed exactly right, it's too easy for the text to go off the top of the screen or not get onto the screen on the bottom fast enough. So the smallest type that you can read is the right setting for the distance that you're at. So you need something with variable size fonts and the ability to change it to suit the situation and the eyesight of the reader.
Sorry for interruption. I'm sure that maybe if vanity is a factor, the font might have to be a little bigger font size.
Yeah. The font size, like I say, but the bigger the font on a smaller screen, the less you can fit on a line, and that means it's going to be having to move pretty fast. And if you look away from the prompter for any reason at all, at a paragraph break or something, that text is moving, and you look back, you will not be able to find your place because it's moved since you last looked at it. And that's why we put in blank lines at the ends of sentences, so they give you a moving marker that you can reference if you have to look away and look at another person or look out at the rest of the audience or something and look back, so that you have the ability to find your way back into the script. Otherwise, it can be quite difficult since that text is moving, and the larger the font, the faster it moves.
So you mentioned blank lines at the end of the font. What's your preparation for someone to tell them what signals to look for, how you're going to hand off? Do you negotiate that, or are you pretty rigid with how you're coaching?
We ask for the scripts in advance, which of course they never give it to us in advance. We ask for it at least a day in advance, and usually we'll get it about 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night, the night before the shoot. And it may be 60 pages of text, all formatted very strangely in frames or in Excel spreadsheets. We've gotten, all kinds of documents from people. You don't know what they're going to give you. And so we have to go in and separate out so that their carriage returns only at the ends of paragraphs and not at the end of every line, because some people will format it for a printout for something that they're printing out or their own hand-copied text that they're going to carry in their hand as a backup. And so then it has a hard carriage return on every line, about every 20 characters. And so when you load that into the teleprompter, all those hard carriage returns reformat themselves because you change the font size once it gets into the teleprompter. And now you may have lines with just one word on them in the middle of a sentence. So you have to go in and remove those extra carriage returns and put the carriage returns at the end of a paragraph. And I put a double carriage return at the end of every paragraph to separate it from the next paragraph, so you have a blank line scrolling up. And it gives the person a good pause to slow down, because people, when they see that text moving, they tend to speed up because they get nervous that it's going to go off the screen, even though if it's being controlled by a competent teleprompter operator, it should never go off the screen before they read it. Unless you're Burt Lancaster, and he was crazy. You had to scroll off the screen. If you didn't have the text he was speaking off the top of the screen when he spoke it, he'd yell at you.
Hopefully he waited till after his line. So I'm sure this late arriving script, massively included, was perfect, no adjustments that needed to be made.
Oh, no. They're always full of stage direction, and, this is the one where he turns from the camera and walks, pensively as he thinks about the stuff that he's speaking at. So you have all that stage direction that has to be pulled out, and other references, time references, slide cues, things like that always have to be pulled out so that people aren't confused by seeing that stuff come up in the teleprompter, and it takes up way too much room.
How often do you get to change the artistic direction of a script based on the technical basis of running the teleprompter, if you get that leeway?
Well, we frown a great deal on changing the words unless we have permission. Only if somebody keeps stumbling over one word, they can't pronounce a certain word, we might suggest an alternative word. with their agreement and the agreement of all involved. Because a lot of times some of these scripts are vetted by lawyers because they're commercials, things like that, that have to have a specific amount of context, and certain words mean different things legally. So and or are very important, and so you can't change even an and or an or without the fear of lawyers being involved.
Do you emphasize those keywords?
Mm-hmm. Besides those keywords, usually you can throw in, if somebody is having trouble reading, you throw in extra carriage returns to put blank lines in to separate it up some. And that gives them the ability to follow it more easily if they're having trouble reading, because it's easy to get lost from line to line to line to line if all the sentences are run together without paragraph marks in between them. Okay.
Thanks for allowing us to indulge you a little bit. We had some time for our producers to give us some questions, so appreciate your expertise, Courtney. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, the two that I think that I have on my computer, I'm just looking at what I had, is prompter, presentation prompter, which I would use, and then there's also Prompter Plus, and then also Prompt Smart Studio. Now, Prompt Smart Studio is one of those ones that reads along with you. So if I'm by myself here at the house and I need to do something, I'll do it. The real problem with Prompt Smart is actually it works almost perfectly. I mean, it actually works perfectly as far as the reading goes. The editing is really painful. And that's super important, as Courtney would say. I have to like close it and open it and do this thing and move it over. And it felt like the person who wrote it didn't understand that, you're going to be editing this all the time. And so it's really painful from an editing perspective. Once it's in there, it actually sticks on it. The only thing about it is, Courtney will, get this as well, is it tends to be jerky because it's kind of jumping to the next thing, not a smooth, so you have to get used to reading it that way, because the smoothness of the text is really important for tracking. And so one of the problems, for instance, that we have with teleprompting is we learned that it doesn't really work to stream it over Zoom because the Zoom compression causes it to jump. Itself. So while it's going smoothly for the teleprompt operator, it's jumping in Zoom because Zoom's waiting for the frame to change enough and then it goes. And so it's a little harder to read. And so what we learned that we had to do is we have to have the teleprompt operator, if we're doing it remotely, control a computer, like do a screen share of the computer. That way it's jerky for them, but not jerky for us. And so it's nice and smooth at that point to keep it where it needs to be. We think that now, I guess Parsec just came out of beta for the Mac. So we're hoping that we can start using Parsec for that kind of thing, which we think will do better in that area. As far as the actual teleprompter, we built a lot of them, but what I will say is that the iCan 12-inch for 6 feet is probably a pretty good value as far as it has the screen flipping, it's bright enough, it compacts down into almost nothing. I mean, I think that it gets a lot smaller to pack than the prompter people ones.
Thanks. Go ahead, Mark.
So when I read the question, it comes back to me as not something for reading scripts, but something as a way of communicating with the talent, and because it talks about announcements. So I'm wondering if that's something that's better for comms, or if it's something you would want a larger teleprompter so you could use larger bold-face type to kind of grab their attention as they're looking at the camera.
Guy?
Yeah, there is a number of these that I was looking at over at the Infocom trade show, and this is the benefit of going to a trade show so that you can see what 6 feet looks like. And for a 12-inch, it gets pretty small, and with the larger type, you can do the 65-point type like Courtney was mentioning, but now you don't have a whole lot of space. So I'm using a 17-inch prompter, people that I'm looking into right now, and I've had it for like 12 years. So, I mean, these things last. Actually, I did swap out the monitor. I did stick a 4K monitor, so you can swap them out. But the nice thing about the higher end ones is that you can adjust them. So if you throw a different camera in there, you have these adjustments where you can fine tune them and make them go up, down, left, right. And so if you get a cheap one, sometimes you don't get those tweaks. So you get what you pay for. So I'd be looking at the iCan line and then the prompter people.
Thanks, Guy. And Mitchell.
Mark kind of touched on this. This is a completely different suggestion. Some people do what's called shadowing, and they just have an earbud in their ear, and somebody's reading the text to them, and they're reading it back. So some people, depending upon their ability to do that, may completely eliminate needing to use a teleprompter of any kind. The only problem is that they need to be practiced. They have to understand how to do that because it does require your brain to be in two places at once.
Yeah, you definitely got to know the abilities of your talent. Courtney, you have some more to add?
Yeah, thing on resolution. 4K monitors are not a good choice for a teleprompter. Actually, the lower resolution, all of our teleprompters run standard def video, composite video, because you're using 65-point type, so the sharpness of the characters isn't really important. It's the readability and the smoothness of the scrolling. So the more resolution, the more bits there on the screen, the harder it is to smoothly scroll that screen up. It takes a lot more computer power, and to do it smoothly is a lot more problematic. To do variable speed smoothly is problematic with high-resolution monitors. So don't choose a monitor or software that says, hey, it's 4K, because you're not going to use it for a teleprompter. Remember, with 65-point type, you're not going to have a readability problem based on the resolution.
Sounds like a good idea, though. Go ahead, Alex.
And if you have some C stands, I recommend going big. Just throw those teleprompters and just build it out as big as you can make it.
Nice. I think, Alex, you'd mentioned before about a question that I had put in, getting a camera in front of a large screen or building a large teleprompter. And I think you mentioned something about it might throw off the talent. When might you consider that huge build of a teleprompter versus maybe just a camera in the middle of a screen?
Well, the camera in the middle of the screen is really hard to read the teleprompting, because the camera's in the middle. If you're using it for eye-to-eye contact, we've definitely done it with some smaller cameras, and that's worked okay. For the big teleprompter, it's usually so that you can feel kind of life-sized when you're doing eye-to-eye contact. So kind of an Interatron style. It's not really designed for people to read anything. It's designed for them to see somebody and have them look at least as big as they would in real life. And so those are the reasons we go with really large teleprompters occasionally.
Okay. Yeah. We had a good showing from our panel. Nearly everyone got in at least once on that question. See, this is the available information. I'll weigh in myself there. I'm using a teleprompter for Interatron, as Alex mentioned. So it's mostly for keeping eye contact. And Graham, since you mentioned budget and large teleprompter in your question, I will say that the only thing that you really need for a teleprompter is a slanted piece of glass and a display to it. Now, you want to make sure that there's no light that hits the back of the glass and make sure there's nothing flashing on the camera in order to avoid glare, but that's really all you need.
The display has to be able to reverse the text. That's really important.
Plus, you have to be able to reverse the text, which is very important. Now, the one I have here, I'm using OBS to make a custom mix, and I have like the gallery view, so I can keep contact with, actually, I think I could actually even share that. Let me see. So, and there we go. So I have my own mix, and I can change it since it's in software. I can change, what I'm looking at, whether I want to look at me. That's not a part of it. So really just having that, I've found that the replacement pieces of glass that you can get in AliExpress, this one's a 16-inch, so a nice large size screen. The replacement pieces of glass I've got for under $50 in AliExpress, and they come with like a little cartridge that holds the glass in. So you could actually just make that into a teleprompter, get yourself a screen. I would recommend at least 400 nits brightness for indoor settings. That tends to work okay if you have something fairly shaded. I see Courtney's giving me the okay on that one. Outdoors, all bets are off. But for an indoor setting, I actually tried one that was a little bit mediocre, around 200 nits. Not so much. I was losing a lot of contrast and things. But you can put it together with sticks and paper as long as you have the glass where you need it. Now, it's not going to be convenient to change out lenses or to move if you build something yourself, but it's cheap and you can get a larger size than you could if budget is the main factor.
Svietlana from Minsk in Belarus says, good morning. Mukana seems to have some bugs with capturing and showing messages. Yesterday, I typed 2 messages, one after another. The first one was invoiced, but later, after the show had finished, the message disappeared, but the second message was displayed.
Go ahead, Alex.
Occasionally, I am actually showing people how Mukana works by rearranging a whole bunch of things and filling up pages that you don't usually see. And so it's just an easy way for me to go, oh, this is what happens with questions. And so I kind of move them all around. And so yesterday morning, the confusion there, I had a meeting at 11 that I needed to show somebody at a movie studio how Mukana works. so I just moved, I just grab all the questions and move them all back. And then I move all these things forward and I put some in this channel and this channel and this channel. And then it's just an easy way to have it all there. So that's why it was rearranged. so every once in a while you'll see that there's a whole jostling of something. If suddenly all the questions just come out of everywhere after the show, it just means Alex was showing off the product. so anyway, that's what that is.
I think if you look at the terms of service, question jostling might be in the language somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
And Svietlana has another question. She says, why doesn't the input, quote, say something in chat tab work, but only recent queues? And second, is input in recent queues limited to the number of symbols available? It just didn't let me type one message instead of these 2.
It is limited to the number of text. So we try to keep them to a point where we can read them well. So sorry, I didn't put my hand up.
Go ahead,
so yeah, it is limited to the number of letters that you can put in. The goal is to keep people asking questions that we can read comfortably for the show.
Okay, I think Courtney, you want to?
Yeah, I was going to ask Alex, what is the character limit?
I think it's set currently at 250 characters. Okay. I think it's something like that.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that feels about right. And if you use, if you try to compose them outside of it, you may run into problems whenever you type it in. I've seen some of our producers submit questions and they have that sort of like, when they ran out of character space and it just continued on. But if you compose it inside of Mukana, then you'll get a notification when you're running out and when you've run out of characters.
Douglas Carmichael asks, what specific IT skill or credential would be the most useful for the way the media production landscape is going beyond the basics? For example, networking, Cisco, AWS.
Go ahead, Nigel.
I think you can answer yes to all your examples. I think networking and, Cisco tools and products and AWS, all of those. I guess my journey over the last year has taught me the biggest gap I had was networking. And I did networking for a long time ago. And I found the most useful entrance, by the way, was the Ordinate level 1 and level 2 certification. Even if you don't want to do Dante, there's some really good networking stuff in there. But building networks, learning about VLANs and QoS and all of those things, I think is probably becoming the base skill. And then, if you want to go virtual to the cloud and AWS and those products, the Cisco ones will be more Cisco-based. There'll be other ones, but I think basic networking skills is probably the critical learning space.
And Alex?
Yeah, I think knowing a lot of those things are important. I don't know the certification of any person that's worked for me in the last decade, maybe 2 decades. Like, I just don't care. So the thing is that I don't know anybody that asks for certifications. So maybe, big corporations maybe ask for them. But people who are doing media production generally are not asking for your certifications. They're asking for, they want, it's usually you worked on something already and you've shown that you know how to do it. Taking those certification courses can be useful because they allow you to know that you know it, and they'll force you to go through things that you may not learn on the field because they just aren't used often on the field. But I don't know anybody in media production that asks for certifications.
Okay, Douglas. There you go.
Lois Richter from Davis, California says, sound recording has used lots of technology over the years. Anyone up for giving us a history lesson? Wax? What do you mean wax?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
You mean like in the old radio days, scatter the wax, splatter the platters? Yeah, wax, they used wax, and then they went on to lacquer, and then they actually could use metal. And I think some of the first reel-to-reels were wire, and then they went on to magnetic tape. And then, of course, the rest is history. I'm sure Courtney has some personal knowledge of all of those formats.
Not only do I have personal knowledge, there is an Edison Diamond disc player right over my shoulder here, underneath those awards, that plays back these incredibly thick, they're quarter-inch thick platters that are made out of compressed wood with a shellac coating on top of that, which is the sound is pressed into it. The little grooves are pressed into it with the metal from a metal plate. And those were popular. That one was built in 1924 and is completely mechanical. So there's no electric parts in there, no amplification, and it is pretty loud. If I were to play it back, you could hear it over here really well. So as we transferred from that to the electronic age in the 30s, they started adding magnetic pickups onto those phonographs and electrical amplification. So once we entered the world of radio, the sound recordings became amplified electronically. And the first ones were actual, shellac or hard wax that a stylus vibrated and carved a little track into a rotating cylinder on the original Edison cylinder photographs. So we've come a long way. Now we have recorders with no moving parts, which is a godsend, because having worked in the field with DAT recorders, which record on, 1/8-inch long tape with a rotating head, trying to write diagonal tracks down that piece of tape as it passed across a rotating head. It had to be manufactured with the precision of a watchmaker, and any piece of dust or dirt would get in there, would screw things up to the point that it couldn't play or couldn't record. So thankfully we've moved to completely digital recording on, memory and non-moving media, which is a godsend. And I hope never to have to go back to anything that has the media that moves across a head or a stylus to reproduce.
That almost sounded like a little digital media advertisement there. I think that's all the wax that we have for that. Let's go to our next question.
Vincent Alvarez from Bellingham, Washington. Moved to a new work location. What type of AV equipment is okay to be stored in a no temp control warehouse? Otherwise, it will have to fit in my office. Yearly weather range 28 to 90 Fahrenheit. Average humidity in Bellingham, Washington.
Go ahead, Alex.
Most of the stuff that you buy will be rated to be fine in those temperature ranges. They usually have to get more. They may not like to operate in those ranges. Being stored in those ranges is usually not a big deal. Hotter or colder than that. Now, the freezing has become the thing that you have to really watch for under 32 degrees. But it usually, if you go on a plane, if you send your stuff on a plane, it's going to get cold. So there's a lot of places that should be okay.
Courtney?
Yeah, heat probably, if it's comfortable enough to be in, heat is probably not going to be your biggest problem. Is humidity. Controlling the humidity in equipment is the detriment to electronic equipment, because if the temperature ranges from hot to cold during the day and there's humidity involved, it can condense. Water can condense on the surface of the circuit boards inside, and that can cause corrosion or contamination. And that is going to be the main bugaboo you're going to be dealing with in storing equipment in a non-temperature controlled or humidity controlled environment. Get you some silica gel packets. You can buy them online for a variety of prices. I get some that are for 3D printing. You have to keep your filament dry. So I have dry boxes, which are basically these big plastic bins that have a rubber seal around the top of them and 4 buckle clamps on the sides, so that seals it in completely and it keeps the humidity out. And you throw a bunch of silicone gel in there, packets in there to absorb the humidity that's in there, and it can keep the humidity below about 20%, and you won't have any problems with electronic gear storing it for long periods of time.
Thanks for that. Ken, looks like our interest in teleprompting has returned.
It has indeed. Peter Belbin in Houston says, if panelists are using teleprompters to improve eye contact while contributing, what are panelists using and at what distance?
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I just use a simple teleprompter, as I described earlier, that I bought from Amazon. It's a piece of glass that has a 10-inch monitor underneath it. It's probably about 3.5, 4 feet away from me. I have a monitor that's just one of the outputs of my ATEM, and I use the ATEM to change what I put on that monitor. It's great for looking at things like this. It's really not great. It's not really big enough for doing good reading from.
And Mark?
So I have a similar setup. I have a TOUC LAIT Tucalat, maybe 12-inch teleprompter with a Lilliput 10-inch monitor on it. It's great for having the speaker view up so you can get the eye contact, but if you try and read the gallery on it, it's pretty difficult at 36 inches away.
Mitchell?
I went crazy with this question actually last year, looking for all kinds of teleprompters at different sizes, different situations. And just at the nick of time before I dropped $3,000 on a 24-inch, this device came along, made by the folks at ICANN. And if you could just bear with my camera abilities here. It's just a small 7-inch screen that clips on the front of the camera, very much like a matte box does. And it's sitting like right there in front of me. And its best job is allowing me to make eye contact with the gallery or whoever the active speaker is on Zoom. And I highly recommend it. It's $200. Yeah, it may not be the greatest device in the world, but it does exactly what I need it to do. It's not huge. It doesn't fill up my landscape here. And it does a great job. $200.
Yeah, I think those will be helpful for ultra mobile setup. Good, Courtney?
Well, I own more teleprompters than all of the panel combined, and I'm not using one. So what does that tell you? I'm taking a busman's holiday. I just have my Canon camera just at the top of my monitor in the middle, and I try and keep the gallery up and the program monitor near that, so if I look up, I can see myself and I can look kind of in the direction of the lens, but I know it's not ideal. But I just don't have room to put it in my living room. It kind of, a good-sized teleprompter for eye contact takes up a lot of space because, that full-size monitor has to sit horizontally, and then you got a piece of 45-degree glass sitting in front of it, and then the camera behind that. So you have to have about 3 feet of depth beyond your screen to accommodate it, and I just don't have the room.
I mean, when you're that good, you don't need one. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'm using what began its life as a 17-inch Pro line from Prompter People. The way that I have it set up is a little different than most. I have the Zoom meeting set up so that I can see gallery view, and then I move the little tiles so you can move people around. So I'll move program to almost dead center, and then I have the Mukana panelist view, so I can see that. And then if there's notes, like say for instance, there's going to be a question that's like 10 minutes away, but I have a couple things that I want to hit, I'll type some notes in there, and that way I can see all this going on at the same time. So I'm running mine through a decimator because I swapped out the monitor with this 4K monitor, but it's still running in 1080, and I actually wish I had a 4K decimator because I have so much stuff going on. So I have a web browser, Zoom, and then notes, and there's still not enough space. I almost need I could really use the 20 or the 24 inch. So if you're doing it this way, where you have a lot of things going on, then it's nice to have the real estate to be able to put everything. Because right now, we don't like to show the back end on the air, but there's a lot going on to be able to see all this stuff with your head up. Otherwise, I have to look down. I have another monitor right below. And then if I rewatch the show and I see my head looking down, I mean, it's totally distracting, and other shows that I've been on. So I try to maintain eye contact, and having the prompter is just wonderful. I mean, it's a huge difference if you're going to be doing this a lot.
Yeah. And Guy, did you mention when you're putting notes up on the screen, is that an opaque just notes, or are you using software for that?
Windows, just Notepad. Yeah, just open up Notepad and throw it in the corner.
Okay. I know, I think Rupert McRae had done something where he used Notepad++, and there was a transparency setting that he could set for it. And he put it up and had it. So it might be a little less intrusive. So I had mentioned I have a 16-inch teleprompter. It's about 3 or 4 inches from my face, and I've got it large enough to where I can put the gallery view and I can put a custom view in the center, or I can move things around. Different meetings, I can custom make the Zoom gallery to fit what's needed. Some caution is that it's one problem when you put your whole world in the teleprompter and the teleprompter gets larger. You could defeat the purpose because your screen, if it's too close or if it gets too big, you can still look left and right. And so if you have a large teleprompter, one good thing to note is that your camera is probably sitting in a specific part behind that teleprompter. So if you remember that, your gaze can be enhanced by knowing exactly which panelist the camera sits behind. That's your center of your vision. Also, as far as your height, your elevation can be helpful with that. Guy, did you have something else to add?
Yeah, I forgot to mention earlier, I said that this one's 6 feet away from me. So it's a ways away, but I'm in a hallway and it's a tight location. So in order to keep this thing up and at the height that I want without having tripod legs spread across this narrow walkway, I actually put it on a triad orbit stand. And so that allows me, and it's got casters, so I can move it around if I want to, but it's a very slim profile. I mean, really slim profile. I know Courtney had mentioned that it would take up a lot of space, but this whole thing that you're looking at me in is in like a 4 feet by 8 feet space. Like, it's super tight. And I mean, people walk by me during the show right here and can't even tell. That's how slim this setup is.
So do you have a dedicated camera that just lives attached to that teleprompter, Guy?
Yeah, there's a Zcam E2 in there. I swapped it out for this red the other day, but red's a little overkill for the show, maybe. I don't know. What? Red for a webcam? Come on.
Overkill?
It's right there.
Nice.
Yeah, and the fan noise drowns you out from the red.
Noise assist, man. Noise assist.
It's not decadence. It's office hours.
Here's a question from Harshid Trivedi in Daytona Beach, Florida. Can the panel give us your top 2 mics, one expensive, and one budget?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I love my microphones. I would say starting at the low end, and it's probably a very useful microphone, the great Shure SM58, this handheld microphone. You can use it for just about any situation. And then on the top of the line, the Neumann U87, which is behind me. That would be an expensive one. Although Mickey has shown up a few times with a Neumann that's worth about $5,000. So that puts me to shame.
Have to rework those dollar figures. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, the one that we send out to folks that's a little less expensive is the MV7. It's a USB and XLR, and it's pretty good. It's not low end, but it's less expensive. And the one that I'm using is the 102, the TLM 102 Neumann, and it's about $700 or $800. So it's a little bit more expensive.
Courtney?
Well, I like the one I'm using, and I've been using it for a while, which is the TechZone Stellar X2. It's designed around the Neumann to look like, or use the same capsule size and use the same capsule sputtered diaphragm as the Neumanns, and its FET amp that's built into it is tailored to sound like a Neumann U87. So it only is $200, so it's a budget mic. For the expensive mic, I like the microphone that Bill uses, which is the Sennheiser 416. I've got a couple of those. That's about $1,000 to $1,200 in that range. It's a good smooth mic. It's used for a lot of voiceover or voice booth work, as well as ADR for replacing, and it's used in a lot of film production as a primary mic. It is a hypercardioid for doing dialogue in films.
And Guy?
Yeah, the mic that I love the most, and when I listened to it for the first time, it sounded so natural. When I had my cans on, I just couldn't believe that my own voice sounded so smooth, and that's the Shep CMIT 5U. It's that blue mic that you'll see pretty often on sets. I did a review. I'll put up a link in the chat and where I record, and you'll see my reaction on the CMIT Mini. The other one would be a Sanken COS 11D lavalier, or the DPA 4071 lavalier. Those are two of the ones that I find myself gravitating towards. In fact, there's one right under my foot right now in the case that I have my foot on.
Nice. I'm using an ADK A51 Type 5S. S is for SPL, so it's made for recording loud noises. You can activate a tab in it. It's a decent large diaphragm condenser. They don't make it anymore. You can find them on eBay for around $100, and I think it sounds decent. Okay. As far as a cheap microphone, I would say some of these, especially since getting talent and having proximity sometimes is more important than just a really good microphone that you have to pull further away. Those little microphone top cameras can do a pretty decent job of improving, enhancing yours or your talent's audio. The Rode makes one, the Rode cam mic. I forget the model of it, but I have a couple of the Movos, which, according to your taste, you may prefer those better. Let's go to our next question.
Micah McCallum, Newburgh, New York. Does anyone have any experience with the StreamDeck iOS app? And what would be the possible disadvantages when compared to a physical StreamDeck?
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I tried it for a while and found it endlessly frustrating. The thing about the StreamDeck, and it's sort of in your question, is the physical nature of it. The fact that I can move my hand to the left, I can find a button, I get tactile feedback, and I can press it without looking at it. I found with the iOS device, I was always having to look at it. I probably forgot to change the screen, so the screen went off and I had to turn it back on again. And so at the end of the day, the benefit of the StreamDeck is this tactile force feedback you get. It's not always perfect, and sometimes you press the button, you think you have and you haven't, but that's the huge difference.
Yeah, I guess you could have the flexibility of the screen, but if I'm not mistaken, the iOS app, isn't that a pay per month application?
It is. You have to. I know it's pay per month, but it's not free. Once, not like the. I don't remember what the charging thing was because I stopped using it.
Yeah, there are a couple of free substitutes if budget's an option. All right, let's go to our next question.
Harshid Trivedi, Daytona Beach, Florida. What's office hours space up to these days?
Well, we happen to have John Preto with us. John, what's going on with office hour space?
That's interesting you said that, because I just sent Dennis a picture. I don't know if he got it that fast or not, but we are doing a 7X upscale Nova payloader, which was a 1960s Estes rocket, which was 21 inches in length, but has a clear tube on the top of it. And so 7X is about 11 feet rocket with a 6-inch clear section tube, polycarbonate on the top, with the 360-degree view camera in that tube. I'll have put a downward facing camera in there as well, and then we'll stream it live on office hours, hopefully.
We don't hear you.
Whoops. Just trying to be a good steward there. Thank you, John, for the update. That was really engaging for much of our community. So looking forward to what comes out of the OH space projects.
Vincent Alvarez in Bellingham, Washington says, my dad is a big trivia buff, as am I. What's a TV show or movie trivia that has stuck with you and you've found interesting?
Nigel?
I'm endlessly entertained by listening to the stories of this panel and others about movies and what's real and what isn't, because I'm from a completely different world. I'll tell you that I took Bill's advice and have just finished watching The Offer. on Paramount Plus about the creation of The Godfather. I don't know how much of it's real, but it's full of interesting factoids and things that I think if you're interested in that movie and stuff, you would enjoy.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I used to enjoy and still try to enjoy remembering character actors' names from character actors that you've seen in movies years and years, like Charles Lane. Do you know who Charles Lane is? This guy? He played the same character for 100 until he was 102. I think the first time he appeared in film, and he had like a 70-year career. As a character actor, always played the skinflint or the bank manager or the IRS guy or the, Homer Bedloe on Petticoat Junction, So I pride myself on seeing a character actor and go, oh, that's Dickie Moore. Oh, that's Charles Lane. Oh, that's... And trying to recall. And as I get older, it's becoming tougher and tougher. And it's a nice little mental exercise that is great for movie trivia when I can look them up easily on IMDb. That's a lot easier.
At the risk of telling my age, what's a skinflint?
A stingy person who is only concerned with the small details of law and order.
Ah, thank you for that, Colin. Alex?
I like Courtney. I think my problem is if I see an actor and I can't place where I saw them in another movie, it starts to become a real problem for me. Like I just sit there and churn. My daughter and I both have this problem where the two of us will go back and forth of like, that's where that person
You find out he's in your neighborhood.
Yeah, but it's just like, it's this constant, like if we see that movie, we're like, what was that movie that we saw before with that person in it? And usually if it's obscure, it's not necessarily a character actor, but just someone it's like an actor, but we just noticed that there was some other thing. And until I can close that, it becomes a problem. I can give you some unpublished trivia, which is that the pod race in episode 1, I might have mentioned it here in the show, but it's not published anywhere. The original length was 22 minutes. The semi-ending length was 11 minutes, and the one that ended up on the movie was about 7.5 minutes, and the best one was about 11 minutes. So it needed to be cut at 22 minutes, but at 7.5 minutes, you couldn't tell what was going on. So anyway, there's some trivia for you.
We'll take Star Wars trivia anytime. Carte blanche. Go, Courtney.
And a great aid these days is my Google Home, because I'll wake up in the middle of the night and something will be perplexing me, like Alex said, so I can't remember the name of the actors that were in this movie. And I'll just ask the Google guy, and I'll just say, who starred in such and such? And he'll give me a list. That's the name I'm looking for. In the middle of the night, I'll do that.
Now you can sleep. It's your sleep aid. Go ahead, Mitchell.
When I had my morning radio show, I was amazed at how much trivia or stories surround the Wizard of Oz. There's so much back-end crazy stuff that apparently happened while they were filming it that it makes for a book's worth of interesting things. And everything from somebody supposedly expired in the opening sequence of the witch making her appearance, right down to the little person that had a thing for Dorothy. And his overtures during the show caused some
What you talking about there, Mitch? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So it was all fun and games, and I'm just amazed how much trivia is associated with it.
Go ahead, Alex.
The other one that a lot of us that have worked in sound effects can see, the Wilhelm scream is in a lot of things. And if you just do a search for the Wilhelm scream on YouTube, you'll see a long video of all these patched together. It starts in the 30s, I think, of some guy getting shot by an arrow in the butt. And that's the first Wilhelm scream. And then it just happens over and over and over again. And I'm pretty sure that Ben Burt puts it into everything he does. Like I believe that everything, including WALL-E and the Pixar stuff and everything else, somewhere there's a Wilhelm scream. And I think that Ben Burt has to do it. Like I think that because I remember we had conversations about it when we were at Lucasfilm, and I didn't even know what the Wilhelm scream was until I worked with Ben Burt. And so anyway, but it's a and if you do a search, you'll hear it. And even I think the one in episode 1 was when John Knoll. Oh, this is a little trivia for you. There's a shot where a fighter is coming towards the donut ship, and when it does the Wilhelm scream, the person in the fighter is John Knoll, the visual effects supervisor. Like we all got to be in the movie, and that's his place in the movie. You'll see a shot of him, and just as his ship is getting blown up. So hearing the Wilhelm scream in movies is a common thing that you're kind of listening. There's some processor in the back end of my thing that I hear that, and the other thing is. Again, another George Lucas one is I think every George Lucas movie, there is some point in the movie where someone says, I've got a bad feeling about this. And I think it's in every George Lucas thing. Someone has a bad feeling about something.
And there is a Wilhelm scream compilation on YouTube. Just search for Wilhelm scream.
And then once you hear it and you see it in all these different environments, it'll tune this little thing in the back of your head that will hear it all the time.
Nice. Mitchell?
Yeah, 2 fun ones. Spielberg always has a shooting star somewhere in all of his movies. And John Landis started this elevator scenes where the talent is in an elevator waiting to get to the next floor. Almost always has some version of The Girl from Ipanema played on the speakers.
Nice.
So, wait, I got to tell you something about that. I didn't know that. We had to do a waiting thing. We had to do a wait. And so this is the funny thing that happens with these things is I didn't realize that he does that, but we had to wait between these 2 segments while we were rehearsing something. And we had to do it over and over again for a couple of days in the rehearsals. And I asked someone, I said, we need something for people to wait. Why don't we just go find Girl from Ipanema, like some kind of elevator version of it, and we'll play it between the things. And everybody laughed when it came on. We all knew what it was. And I didn't realize that we probably were programmed by John Landis films to think of like elevators is an elevator version of Girl from Ipanema, which is, by the way, a really actually good song when you hear the non-elevator version.
Nice. I'm always interested to know of scenes that were improvised in movies. I think Jim Carrey was famous. I think a large part of the Chitty Chitty Bang Bang scene was improvised.
And all the Best of Show.
Yeah.
Literally all his movies are just Waiting for Guffman, Best of Show, even Spinal Tap. They're all, they just put the actors in position and tell them to go. Like, this is what you have to say. You have to get to these points during this scene and then just let them go. And they figure it out. That's why there's so few different actors on those movies. It was because you have to be really good at improvisation.
Yeah. I was imagining, like, how would you script this stuff? And so then you're going to make a weird noise and you're going to go into a duck. And then we want you to do it just like this and make sure you hit your cue points. Like, yeah, probably best it's not improvised. Let's go to our next question.
Harshid Trivedi in Daytona Beach asks, Alex, really glad you're on the mend. Would you be able to share any Zim music or anything Africa?
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to play something for you. Hopefully it's not too loud. I think I wired my Apple Music through loop back into here, so we'll see how this turns out. Or it won't play at all, or it'll be really loud. I apologize ahead of time. But my favorite Zimbabwean artists are Oliver Kudzi, or Tuku, is what a lot of people knew him as. He passed away a couple of years ago. Chiwanizo Marare, who was a great artist, she passed away she passed away 9 years ago tomorrow. But she's really incredible Mbira artist and singer. My brain turned off. Simon Mashoko he passed away a long time ago. He's one of the great Mbira artists. So if you search for Simon Mashoko, he's on Paul Berliner has some recordings from the 70s where you can hear him, and we recorded at his house. And he's amazing Mbira artist, just really great. Mbira is the thumb piano that is used in Zimbabwe. And then Thomas Mafumo is probably the best known. I'll play a song. There's an album, if you go up to Amazon, I apologize ahead of time. So if you think this song is good, you should go buy it very quickly because it's not available on any digital format. So this album is called Thomas Mafumo, the best of Thomas Mafumo, Chimurenga Forever. And it is none of the songs are available. It's some weird licensing thing. And so I have the CD and I ripped it onto my iTunes. And by the way, if you want a little trivia, if you have a CD that isn't in Apple Music or Spotify and you wanted to play on your Apple devices, I don't know how the other ones work. If you rip the CD into iTunes and let it sit there for about an hour, it will be, and it won't show up as an album. But if you make it a playlist, it will distribute it to all of your Apple products. so you can actually listen to it. So you can actually get your CDs into all your Apple products, but you have to make it a playlist. Anyways, so I ran into that by accident out of trying to get it to work because it's the perfect, this album, mixing this into your barbecue and pool mixes, it's just the perfect thing. So I'll play a little bit and I apologize if it's too loud. So anyway, I didn't hear what that was, but you heard a little bit of it. And if you like the beginning, it's one of my favorite songs from Thomas Mafumo. And it's all about revolution. So it's not happy music, but it sounds happy, and we don't know what the words mean. So it is. If you like that at all, then you should run and get this album because it's a really good one. You can get it on Amazon. I don't think it costs very much. But I don't know how many they have left, and we may sell them out because we just talked about it on a show. As far as not African, the only other one that I would add off the top of my head is Femi Kuti, a Fela Kuti who is like Fela Kuti. But then his son Femi Kuti, he is incredible artist. The song that he's probably best known for is Truth Don't Lie. And when you go to his bar in Lagos, Nigeria, he plays like 3 or 4 nights a week there. And Truth Don't Lie is like the big single. You're expecting to have to wait for 4 hours because you hear the album, the concert's 4 hours long. And you're like, oh, I'm going to have to wait for 4 hours to hear Truth Don't Lie. He opens the show with it. He just is like, okay, I'm going to get this out of the way. And he opens the show with it. And it's an incredible scene because Femi Kuti plays with like 15 brass and he's got like 4 dancers and he's got people on drums. It's just this incredible experience. And he plays for, again, like 3 or 4 hours. And it's just an incredible, a lot of the African artists, if you go to these concerts in Africa, here in the United States, they play for like 90 minutes. But you never see them play that way in Africa. They're always playing like 4 hours and 5 hours and 6 hours. And anyway, it's just an incredible experience. Anyway, so those are some of the suggestions that I would make. And African music is awesome. Someday we will, now that COVID hit, there is a festival called Harare, the Harare International Festival for the Arts, Haifa. And it is South by Southwest in Africa, which means that it's like South by Southwest, but like 10 times cooler than it happens in Harare, Zimbabwe. Even with all the troubles they had, it would happen every year, but COVID got it to stop. So now we're hoping that next year Manuel is going to be able to get it going again. And my goal for next year is that we send a contingent both from our African partners as well as from office hours, and we go in there and cover it and shoot it and stream it and stuff like that because it's just, wow, it's really cool. Anyway, sorry, and if you ask questions about some music or Zimbabwe, Africa, I'll run on. so anyway,
apologize.
Okay, anyway, it's good. It's good stuff.
Yeah, we'll have to check out some of those titles. Alex, are those mostly spelled phonetically?
Thomas Mafumo is Mapfumo, so Mafumo. And then Oliver Takudzi is actually M Takudzi, so it's Mtukudzi Takudzi, I think. And Femi Kuti is last name is Kuti, and Chiwanizo Morare. Chiwanizo is if you search for Chiwanizo, It's and I'll try to spell it, but it's CHIWONISO. So anyway, anyway, if you search for her, you'll find her. If you do Chi Mbira, she's one of the best. She was one of the best known Mbira artists in the world.
What was the song that we used to end the show on? An earlier office hours.
You should bring that back up. Notarapa is the what we used to end this end the show with was a recording I did with Chi in 2005, I think, and it was actually kind of a recovered song because I had gotten there late and she had already started, and so we just plugged it in and it was very low, and I had to pull it all up and then rebuild it, but it was anyway, yeah. That was Nirarapa was the
so we won't be able to find that.
You can find a very overproduced, not as good version on iTunes. If you do it, you'll find it. It's probably one of the better known singles, but the version that I have, even though it hurts me, it's one of those things that has me always in records get really wound up about being early and being ready, is because I screwed up that one recording, because it was just an amazing recording of her playing that song that is better than the album version. And it wasn't a great recording. So it was, but anyway, I'll see if I can find it.
Yeah. Fantastic. It'll give our closing crew some fodder to work through, perhaps, for closing things. All right, well, let's get back, Ken, into some of the nuts and bolts.
Sure thing. Brody Hefner from New York City says, we're hosting interactive Zoom webinars from a home studio with an ATEM switcher. With 2 presenters, is 2 cameras sufficient, or would it feel more natural to use a 2-shot on a 3rd camera when we're interacting with each other?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
On a Zoom webinar, that you don't require a 2-shot or a 3-shot because the gallery tends to get a little small. It'd be better to have everybody on their own position, separately brought in, and then use the ATEM to bring up any graphics or any other material you need to bring into the show. Because as you look in our program, there's very little switching going on. It's pretty much our face, and we switch over to something if we need to do that.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I'd kind of disagree. I think if you have a 3rd camera and you have an ATEM Mini, you have the inputs at least. You have 3 camera inputs and maybe a 4th input for your graphics, whatever. If you have, like you say, 2 presenters where they're sitting in the same room, they may be interacting with each other, where they're looking at each other and talking back and forth to each other. And it's very good to have a 2-shot to set up the relationship between those 2 people so that you know when they're looking off camera at the other presenter where they're looking. So it becomes kind of bizarre if you never see a 2-shot and know the relationship between the 2 presenters in the room. So it's good to have an establishing shot at some point just to know that, the other presenter is to the left of this presenter, so that when they're looking off screen, not into the camera, at the other presenter, you know what they're looking at, so it doesn't seem too bizarre.
I wonder if they would be tempted having that 2 up to maybe tilt towards each other. You may have to give them some direction.
You shouldn't have them directly facing each other, but maybe at a 45-degree angle so that they're kind of looking out into the 3rd camera. And then your close-up cameras are set on either side of that center camera, shooting across to each individual presenter, so that they can either look at the other person or look into the camera if they want to address the at-home audience directly, or look at the other presenter if they're exchanging, pleasantries back and forth.
Thanks, Courtney. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, typically exactly what Courtney was talking about. If you have 2 people, on either side here talking to each other, typically what you want is that you want that center master camera, and then this camera over these cameras here that split wide. A lot of mistakes people make is they put them here. They put them kind of on either side, or they don't spread them out far enough. And so what you're trying to do is get these as far over to the side as they can be without catching the other person. And sometimes you do catch the other person. Some people creatively like to have the person out of focus right in front of them. I don't. But anyway, and so that they can get these shots here. Now, what we're looking for is, as these wide cameras, as they're looking at each other, the game that you're playing is when this person is looking at this person. If you think of their face and you think of their eyes here, I'm trying to be able to see the far corner of the far eye with this wide camera here. So that is, I feel like this camera is where it needs to be over if I can see the far corner of the far eye. So I'm really getting most of the other face. I'm not getting profiles of that person. I want to get as much straight on as I can. And usually that's the rule I give my guys when they're trying to figure out the framing is, can I see the far corner of the far eye is where it is. Remember also when you do this, that IFBs go in the insides. so don't put the IFBs on the outsides where you can see them. You put the IFBs on the far side of the cameras so that you don't see it there. You don't want to, of course, put the cameras over here because you'll cross this is the line of direction that you don't want to cross. So you just want to kind of think through that process there. But I would definitely, if you're having two people in the same room, I don't particularly like doing that very often, but if you do that, this is kind of the very standard setup there. Now, if we move to three people will do this. Once I get to an odd number, I will almost always try to put them on a circle, and I put them, put the people like this, and then I put cameras splitting the gaps. This is for the kind of thing that we do for this show, and you'll see this in Final Cut user group, is by splitting these gaps, I have a straight on shot of everybody. Now, sometimes then I'll put a wider shot up here. These cameras, by the way, I represent them being close. They're often way back zoomed in so that this big camera here can get a wide shot like this up and high of them to give you a sense of where they are. And by splitting these, you get these nice kind of tabletop expression between them all. And I find that to be very pleasing. It was something that was asked to do, and we thought it was a horrible idea, but when we did it, but it turned out that we became very obsessed with it because it's a really nice, you just feel like you're sitting at the table with them. Anyway, those are something to think about.
Alex, those individual cameras, what kind of focal length are you talking about for those?
Whatever works. It depends on how far away they are. It's not a specific focal length. It is. I mean, oftentimes are you talking about the table one? On the table one, the focal lengths tend to be long. They tend to be over 200 mil. You got to get them
away for the wide shot.
Exactly. Right? So we have them way out here shooting in here. Typically these are, if we're using, they're typically on the, over at least over 100 mil, lenses. And oftentimes they can be as much as 200, 300, because we pull them in a large room. We'll pull them way back because that also creates a nice bokeh behind them. It's nice and short. The nice thing here is that we kind of ratchet. What we do here is when there's a lot of space behind the person here, we ratchet the aperture on these cameras so that we know that this area is in focus. If you've got a lot of room back here, you can let this drop off out of focus and actually give yourself what you need to have the person stay in focus no matter where they go in and out. It doesn't have to be this like razor sharp. It depends on how big the cavity is that you're shooting in. So we shot Final Cut user group as an example in a 30 by 30 space. So we had a lot of room behind them to let it drop off. And then in those cases, we used black curtains anyway. So it was more of a Charlie Rose kind of effect. So
any tips on the background? What you're seeing behind those talking heads?
We try to keep it pretty simple. We use a lot of black, for that kind of thing, just black curtains and let it drop off. It's a very Charlie Rose kind of approach. But things that will fall off, it's just a matter of now. The coolest way to use it for these things that we've done for a handful of shows is we have them on a circle, and then we actually put people around here in sometimes three, or it's always an odd number.
Located.
Yeah, but these are risers, so these actually go up. That they can be flat or risers, and so the risers work really, really well. And then what we do is we have, the cameras are on these. So if you think about the people are, let's say here like this. Now the cameras are shooting like this through these. They're somewhere on the inside of those gaps. If we have a hybrid event, we'll put screens up here above them so that these folks can just look at the screen that makes the most sense for them, and then we're shooting these gaps, and it gets a little bit more complicated if there's more than 3 people. I mean, you can put 5 or 7. We try to persuade people. I know it sounds crazy, but we try to keep them there. Now, this is typically a 12-foot circle, and then usually this is typically about 6 feet. So they're pretty close. And what that means is in this environment, you can fit 200 people within 25 feet of the 25 to 30 feet of the speakers. So they feel very intimate. Everyone that's at the event feels very close to the conversation. I find it to be vastly superior to having them on a front stage looking over each other at each other. That's the big thing. When you have a bunch of people on a stage, when they're all like this, they're all kind of crouching over, like this person's looking across these people, and it's all like and then everyone feels far away because it's a straight shot. By putting them in the middle, the speakers are just comfortably sitting there talking to each other. The audience is seeing it. Now, some of the audience is going to see the back of some of the folks. I mean, that's the issue. One thing that we proposed, we never actually did, but we did propose on one to put this on a car, one of those car turn things, and having it turn like a degree a second or a degree every 5 seconds, and so that they're very, very slowly turning around through the system, so that everyone gets to see them over an hour, over a couple times. That didn't happen yet, but as a hybrid, if you're going to do a hybrid roundtable, in my opinion, this is the best solution. If you're going to put people in the room, it works well.
As you start scaling up the size, you just increase the size of the table, or is there like a max limit that you'd
scaling
recommend?
a number of speakers or the number of viewers, the number of people in the room?
The number of people around the table.
Well, we can put 7 people on a 12-foot diameter thing, and we will fight pretty hard if anyone wants to put more than 7 people on a stage. There'll be email after email after email telling them it's a bad idea based on our experience. 7 is the outer limit of, and we recommend no more than 5 on a stage ever. It's not a good experience for anybody, because on a half an hour show, you put too many people on, no one gets to talk. So they went through all that trouble to get there. You went through all that trouble to bring them there. And what you realize is that the producer is either trying to be fair and including people, like including all the actors, or they are, then the problem is it doesn't turn out that way. It doesn't, like you put, there's someone who did a movie launch yesterday, not with us, but somebody else did a movie launch, and they put 9 actors up there, and only 3 or 4 of them talked. And so the thing is, why don't we just have those 3 or 4? Because the other ones got to sit there uncomfortably in front of thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, yesterday, because they were included. We included them. But the reality is no one asked them any questions. No one cared that they were there. No one even knew who they were. And so the thing is that there were 3 or 4 actors that people recognized, and one with a really good voice, and so everyone just gravitated towards those, and that was it. And so the thing is that this is just poor impulse control by the producer to put that many people on a stage. In my opinion, so 7 is the outer edge of that. And again, it's so that the producer can avoid politics of who they cut out and who they didn't. I get it, but it's really, I don't actually think it serves anybody, and it means that nothing's going to look very good. So that's it.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned this is set up for an odd number of people, right? So you have an empty space.
You can do even. You can do even. It just doesn't look as good. Like it looks amazing odd. Like it's just because you're splitting gaps all the way through. You're shooting between gaps. And so it just feels so the odd number of people, because you're shooting the gaps, looks better. Even works fine. Like what we do is we kind of move one around, and one person gets a little bit of a short shrift. So they don't look quite as good as everybody else. But we used to make it so that everyone didn't look that good. And then we decided, we're just going to throw one person in the pool. So one person gets a little less framing than everybody else. No one outside of us notices. No one says anything like, I can't believe this guy didn't get the same camera shot or whatever. So we just do it that way. But I will say that in the round, once we started doing those in the rounds, we really got sold on it. Like it was like it's the way to do these, in my opinion.
Yeah, sometimes something sounds like a bad idea until you try it.
Yeah,
Well,
we fought it
helps you out.
tooth and nail. Like we were like, this is not. No one should ever do it this way. And you know, it was a Richard Branson thing, and so Virgin was like, this is the way we do them. And we were like, this is a horrible idea. Like this will never work. And we fought it. And within 10 minutes of starting the show, it was with like Richard Branson and Guy Kawasaki and you know all these people. And within a couple minutes, we were like, oh, this is great. This is really good. This looks really good. and then we were sold. And we could still, in the first version, we could see our cameras and it was a mess. And we only had a couple hours to set up. So the camera lighting, the color isn't perfect. And there's all kinds of problems with the first one that we did, but we kept on doing it. Like we just kept refining it. And every show that you'd let us design, we would do it in the round, and we just get it tighter and tighter until we were doing it. I think you'll see a Mark Zuckerberg one in North Carolina that we did that was, They wouldn't let us put it all the way behind him, but the other parts are there. And I just feel like it looks really good.
So there you go, Brody. There's some things for you to think about. Let's go to our next question.
Simon Ray in Shrewsbury, UK says, what VPN solution would panelists use to safely access their personal emails and banking apps if they only had access to shared or public networks for an extended period of time?
Good, Kai. And then Courtney.
Yeah, don't use any of the ones that are free. So you want to use one that you pay for. So like NordVPN would be one. I'd be very weary of some of the free ones. We've packet sniffed them and seen them sending data to Eastern Bloc countries. So be very, very careful. What I do is I take my my iPad and Pro on the road. I bring my own internet, and then if I have to connect to something, I have what's called a Brave browser VPN. So it's only on the iOS. And then I use these security keys as well. So this one's by Yubico. So without this, like people can't get into my AWS. This key is what unlocks it. So you might want to look at some hardware keys. For my banking, I have a key as well that changes every couple of like 20 seconds. It gives a new code. So there's a couple different things you can do to protect yourself while you're out on the road.
Good, Courtney.
Well, maybe I'm too naive, but what I do is I use my cell phone for everything, and I make sure I'm not using Wi-Fi. So I'll turn off the Wi-Fi transmitter in my cell phone, make sure I'm connected to an encrypted cell tower, which is from the original cellular provider. And all of that traffic is by law encrypted in and out. So you do have to be careful because there are things like microcells and man-in-the-middle attacks where someone will put up a thing called a pineapple, which appears to be a cell site, and your phone will lock onto thinking it's a legitimate cell site, and they will intercept the traffic and then send it on to the real cell site. Generally, those microcells that AT&T used to manufacture, they don't manufacture them anymore. They now have gone to just a cellular amplifier. Microcell is a device you could put in your home, and it would connect to your LAN, your local area network of your ISP, your internet provider, and it would give you cellular service in your house with a limited range. So your phone would connect to it, but you would always hear, when you would make a call, you would always hear a beep that would let you know that it's connecting through the microcell and not directly to the cell tower. So you can beware of that for a little security purposes. And then I just never use any publicly available terminals to log into my bank accounts or anything that was with any kind of sensitive information that I would be transmitting back and forth.
Thanks for that information. And our producers have stepped up and they've given us several more questions to answer.
Douglas Carmichael brings one along. Has anyone used the Dejero products for live video transmission from the field? I've heard the name, but never seen details about them.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I had a Dejero for about a year, and it works pretty well. This is a competitor to LiveView. It is not as good as LiveView. It's less expensive, so it's less expensive. The process is a little bit more flexible. It's easier to get additional ones from them, and it's a little bit smaller. At least the one we used was a smaller form factor than the LiveView. But we ended up going back to LiveView because it was we found that it just did better on the transmission. So we had more stable connections. We oftentimes had issues where we would use the Dejero as a backup to the live view. So we were able to see both of them working at the same place at the same time. And at that point, we decided that the live view was superior to the Dejero.
All right, thank you. It's valuable first-person advice. Kent, do we have any more teleprompter questions?
Well, yes, we do. Here's one right here from Peter Belbin. How does that work out? In Houston, he says, teleprompter, how many stops of light loss is typical when using a teleprompter that the lens and camera and lighting has to compensate for due to having to shoot through the splitter?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
My system, it's about one stop, and I yield the rest of my time to Courtney.
I'd say one stop is a little high. All of our teleprompters are 70-30 glass, and that's about a third of a stop, between a third and a half. We don't have any. The 60-40 is about 3/4 of a stop. So you can use that as a rule of thumb. And another thing to consider is that these are partially silvered pieces of optical glass. And depending upon the metal that they use to vacuum evaporate and deposit on that glass, it's usually not silver. You say partially silver, but silver can tarnish if it's not sealed. And a first surface mirror is exposed to the elements unless it's sealed with something. So a lot of times they'll use aluminum or titanium as the metal. And depending upon, then they have to bake that onto the surface of the glass after it is vacuum deposited on there. And it tends to be dichroic of some sort, which means it reflects different wavelengths of light than it passes. So it can cause a color shift. It can usually warm up. Usually it reflects more blue light so it will pass more warm light. So it will warm up the image quite a bit. And so besides the light loss, you will also get a color shift a lot of times through teleprompter glass. Depends on how long it was baked, and it depends on what type of metal was used to cause the reflectivity. So take that into account. And if you're going to color balance multiple cameras, make sure the teleprompters are mounted before you do the color temperature adjustment, auto color temp on those cameras. So it'll take that difference in color into account and adjust for a common white point through the glass of the teleprompter.
I think I see teleprompter uptake sharply rising after his show.
Douglas Carmichael wants to know, many fiber satellite providers talk about goodnighting a feed when you've completed it. Where did that term originate?
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so the issue really is that we need to, so a lot of times when we book satellites, we book them for this time to this time. So it's 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. or whatever it is. A lot of them, we want to make sure the satellite operator doesn't want to turn that off without warning. So they don't want to turn it off in the middle of our show, or it may look like it's over, but we might be running credits, or we might be planning to do something else. So we might be able to do some hits or whatever that's going to be there. So they don't want to, they'll sit there and just leave it open. Now, if that transponder has already been booked for something else, they have to turn it off. A lot of times we book those satellites and we call it an approximate out. So we'll say we want to go to 7 to 9 with a 30-minute approximate. Now, what that means is that they're really not going to turn, if we just do 7 to 9 with a hard out, they'll turn it off on their own. If we say 7 to 9 with an approximate out, they will leave it open for another half hour and charge us for it. And so what happens is that the good night is a specific thing that we say. I don't know why they call it good. I mean, good night is kind of like good night, but good nighting the signal means that we will call the either the knock, or we'll call we'll talk to the satellite operator over comms and say, hey, we're going to good night that signal. That means we're closing it up. And that can be, and that's used on, on fiber relays as well, like the switch or LTN. But we're saying, if we say we're good nighting the signal, it means that we're closing down for the day, and we don't want incur any more charges. so that's the big thing that the good night, and it's a very important thing to do to avoid those charges, and it's very important that nobody turns it off before they hear the good night, because it means that we could be, even though it looks like it's over. We've had satellite operators go, well, I thought it was over, and I'm like, okay, well, it was not. So good nighting is an official relay to tell people to turn off the signal, and we don't want to pay anymore.
Good, Mitchell and Courtney.
In actual practice, it's as simple as it sounds. When you're done with your broadcast, if you're throwing it to a network affiliate in New York, you would say, "Good night, New York," at the very end. Not on the air, but certainly off the air. And that's, like Alex said, is a signal to them that they can now release the time space.
And Courtney?
And here's a tip. If you're on a network show that has satellite transponders between the studio and the network, be careful, because I was on the nightly news one night on ABC with Barbara Walters, and the show hadn't started yet, but the satellite link was up, and this is back in the days of C-band satellite, which was unencrypted network, satellite links between the network and the local affiliate here in Los Angeles. And she was talking on her phone and gave out her phone number to somebody. She was on the satellite. The show hadn't started. The nightly news was live, and we were 30 minutes away from that. But the satellite signal was up. So she gave out her personal cell phone number on the C-band satellite. And there's all those people sitting out there in rural America with those big C-band dishes that are able to pick up the unencrypted network transmission, network satellite links. Now all had Barbara Walters' cell phone number, and they proceeded to call her in the middle of the live newscast. So be aware of that. So you got to let your talent know that we're not live on the air, but we're on the satellite. We have not good nighted the satellite, or we're up before the show. We're live on the satellite so that they don't make a faux pas. These days, most of those that network studio link is encrypted these days, but in the old days it wasn't, and you never know if they're using an old transponder that may not be encrypted.
Go ahead, Alex.
In the early days, when I was probably, this would have been the early 80s, so I don't know, in my 10, 11, 12, 13 years old or whatever, my grandfather, being the radio geek that he is, I mean, he built his own 1100 watt, Heathkit transceiver for his ham radio, but one of the other things he did was he had, I think it was either an 8 or 10 foot parabolic antenna in the backyard, as you do. And anyway, so it was pointed up there. And as kids, we used to love to watch all the news. Exactly what Courtney said. Everything was just left open all the time. And so you'd see the host of like the nightly news between the commercial breaks. And as kids, the thing that we thought was funny is there is an insecurity that hosts have, that they will have, and how do I say this? They will have a bird in their tree, and they are very obsessed with not having a bird in their tree. And they would just dig for gold every single commercial. It would just like most of them would just dig in there to make sure that there's absolutely no chance that there's going to be anything showing on air. And as kids, we thought that was the funniest thing, to just be sitting there watching these people that we see in the nightly news cleaning out their pipes. And so anyway, so the and just ruthlessly, so it was. So anyway, to Courtney, it was just wide open. It was a fun time to be to have a connection. Yeah, it was good.
Thank you for that. And so our producers have. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Someone echo. Okay. Our producers have answered the call, so thank you for that. We're going to move a little quicker through our questions just so that we can spend some good time on each of the questions. Let's go ahead.
Jonas Doutel from Stuttgart asks, can we enable the automatic captions on YouTube again for officehours.global?
Go ahead, Alex.
Yes. I don't know what that takes to do that. I don't know how it got done in the first place, but I'm happy to turn it back on. So I think that somebody else has manager access to it, so they should be able to turn it on. So yes, that's great.
Thanks for bringing that to our attention. Let's go to the
next
one.
Harshid Trivedi from Daytona Beach, Florida asks, can you share your top lighting solution, expensive, and budget?
Okay, and we'll go through this a little quicker. Go ahead, Mitchell, then Guy.
I'm both represented here. My key light is a light panel Astra Soft 1x1, and my fill over here is a Nanlite, and there's a giant difference in price between them.
Good guy.
Yeah, I've got two different things going on here. One is Aperture P300 with an egg crate, and it is attached to an auto pole. And so that would be the expensive option. It's got a cool controller that you could change this to any color of the rainbow. It's RGBW. And then to the right of me, I have a prismatic spectra. This is one of the ring lights that we manufacture that's also RGBW, so it can do any color of the rainbow. So that's my fill, and that over there is my key.
Guy and Alex.
Yeah, the ones we use on a day-to-day basis are the NAND lights, and we have lots of different ones, everything from the 68s to the 100s, the 200s, to the light Luma pads, and we've probably bought hundreds of those, and they've been real successful for us. As far as expensive goes, a lot of the lighting that we use for bigger events are the airy light, the sky panels are something that we use a fair bit for bigger things, as well as the light pads, or I showed them the other day, but these ones that we can we have DPs that bring them in that open them up, and they're just kind of a cloth that go onto something, but we really like to use large sources for those things. And then as far as the stage lighting, we learned this from Tlaloc. This Diablos are really nice.
Courtney.
Well, I never use anything expensive, because I'm really cheap. So what I'm using here is, for a while I tried just a China ball with a regular bulb in it up over there, and eventually I bought some of these, a couple of these newer lights, which are like $209 for two of them, 15-inch flat panel, and I'm using one of those. And for a little fill light, I'm using something that Andy Anotko recommended once, which is this little USB thumb drive. It fits into a thumb drive and is got a dimmer on it, so you can dim it or make it brighter, but with a touch screen. It's just 4 cob lights USB, and that's reflecting into a piece of white material, which is lighting up my eyes and making them more scintillating.
Fantastic. And I like using ring lights, but not the way that they're supposed to be used. I have one as my key off to the side, and I have a grid onto it. I like them because they're quick, they're easy, and they're a large light source. And I rarely stick a camera in them the way that they're intended to be. I have a flexible light for my fill here, and I have another ring light that's providing some color for my background that I rip the guts out of it and then put one of those little LED strips that RGB into it. So it's worked out okay for me. Let's go to our next question.
Craig McFarland in Boston says, what is the trade-off between bumping ATEM camera gain versus increasing lighting?
Good, Courtney, then Alex.
Noise. The noise in the video signal is what the trade-off is. And the less light you have, the more amplification, or the wider open that aperture becomes on your camera. And the more amplification it gives, the more noise is in that in the sensor. And so the noisier your signal, the worse the compression, which means that zoom is going to limit your bandwidth more, because it's going to have trouble compressing that, because there's so much changing from frame to frame because of that noise. So more light, less noise, less compression artifacts, and higher bandwidth.
Good, Alex.
Yeah, the noise is so important to compression that Netflix actually removes the noise for a lot of their transmissions to your TV set, and then add them back in. They add the noise for your film back into the scene in the app, as it goes out to the TV, so that they can avoid the compression costs, because the impression costs are not, the noise is just deadly to the quality of an image there.
So that's a good point. So I guess if your background's not quite lit, Alex, that means you might be taking some of your compression budget away from the subject. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, if your background is complex, if your background is got noise, if your background is changing, all of those things are things that take away bandwidth from the foreground. So if a person's talking, the simpler their background, the more sharp they will look, because it'll just throw a lot of information away here. And then it'll focus really on the person. We've had people, well-known people, in front of a bush that's blowing in the wind, and it's just a mess. The whole thing's a mess, because when you run out of temporal, your temporal compression is compressing between frames, saying how much can I throw away from every frame. When temporal compression can't do anything because everything's changing all the time, including grain, then spatial compression comes in, and it just does it with a hammer. I'm just going to beat everything up because it's not my problem. It's not my fault. Temporal compression couldn't do its job. So nice. The spatial compression is the heavy hammer.
All right, thank you. Let's move on, Ken.
Arshid Trivedi in Daytona Beach, Florida says, "Ken, you rock. Thanks. Alex, thank you so much for always taking me back to Africa via office hours. Can you share an experience you had in Zambia, a story or a situation?"
I don't have any funny stories from Zambia. I did spend some time in Zambia. I spoke at the eLearning Africa there maybe a decade ago. And it's just a really nice, all I would say is Lusaka is very nice. It was interesting to see. So there's one story. so there's a story. Sorry, it took me a second. And then I was like, oh, there's that Zambia story. So on the Zimbabwean side of Victoria Falls, there is a place that you look out. And if you're looking across, you'll see someone, you can sometimes see people just standing on the edge of a very long drop. Like it's like 900 feet or something. So the water's rolling over, and there'll be people up there walking along it and like spearfishing. And they'll just be walking over there, and you're like, what the what? And it's just, you take picture. I've never had a good enough camera to take a picture of it really well. It's always been like some cell phone camera or some camera that, I just didn't have a good one to take a picture of it. But it's always like, what are they doing over there? And it just looks like they could fall off this huge thing all the time. Anyway, so it's just terrifying to see it from the Zimbabwean side. And we just never bothered to go through we just didn't want to go through customs to go to the Zambian side. So when I went to Lusaka to speak, I had been in Zimbabwe for, 3 or 4 weeks. And so a friend of mine who owns a Mac reseller. So Paul and I drove across, and he owns a Mac reseller in Zimbabwe and Zambia. So we were going to his office. And so we went through it, and we got to the other side. I said, I just got to see this. And so we went over. And on the Zambian side, what I didn't realize was the water is really not moving very fast. And it's very, very, shallow right before it goes over Vic Falls on that side. So you just think, because what I was imagining, I realized I was imagining like Niagara Falls, where people are like, there's like this huge amount of water going over it, but not really. It's like this little thin layer that isn't moving very fast. And then it's just kind of going over very casually over the water. But there are alligators down there. So if you slipped, I guess it would be. But you'd really have to, I realized on the Zambian side that you would really have to work to fall off. It's like you would have to want to fall off. And like you wouldn't, it's not something that you would just slip and fall. But from the Zimbabwean side, it looks like you are death defying. So if you see that, if you go to Zimbabwe, which I highly recommend, and you go to Victoria Falls, which I highly recommend, just know that when you see that person walking around spearfishing right at the top of the waterfalls, it's not that dangerous. So it just looks dangerous. So anyway, there's my story.
Thanks, Alex. We knew you could come up with one. Let's go to our next question.
Rajan Shandy in Los Angeles asks, how much time do you spend training on-stage talent before showtime?
Okay, Courtney, then Alex.
It depends. It depends on how much money you have and how much you are willing to sacrifice your employees or whoever they are, the corporation is, if it's a corporate video, to take them away from their real job to rehearse them in doing presentation. And it depends also on whether or not what the purpose of the video is being. If it's an internal video, they won't spend as much time on it. If it's a public-facing video, then they will spend more time, and they will a lot of times take their people who are going to do presentations that may be middle-level managers or marketing people and run them through doing their presentation, presenting their keynote addresses with the videos. I've done a lot of stuff for several major corporations, rehearsing them with Teleprompter. They will bring us in and bring a teleprompter operator in for several days before the live show and rehearse all of the talent with the teleprompter so they know how to work the teleprompter and know how the person that's presenting the slide deck and controlling the slides are going to interface with them, know how to establish eye contact with the people in the audience, and basically smooth out their presentation so that when they do go live, they're well rehearsed. If it's a smaller company, they won't spend any money on it at all. The people will get up there and they'll fumfer around and it will look bad.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, exactly what Courtney said is that it takes a lot of time for us to, there's different levels of prep. So there's prepping and training is very different than prepping. So for a very large corporation that really cares about their presentations, their publicly speaking individuals are being trained 2 to 3 hours a week, every week, year round. So that's like a Salesforce. The people who you see on stage for the main keynotes are in training all the time. And they have people working with them all the time. They're slowly working out all of their little idiosyncrasies. They're slowly working out how they present themselves. They're slowly working out, all these things about them. They're getting videos where they have to watch themselves. So they'll go do this presentation, and then they're going to break it up. And those meetings are molecule changing, because it's just really hard to look at yourself with an expert that says, watch what you do here. That's really annoying. Watch this. See what you're doing with your hand all the time. You got to stop doing that. And then what happens but all that hard training happens long before they have to present. So like, for instance, you'll see Dreamforce coming up here. They won't do that training over the summer. So they'll do all the training that hurts, in the time when they're not on tour, and the time that they're not doing it, because it breaks them up. It's kind of like rebuilding their golf swing. Getting them to present differently is really painful. And you can see someone in the middle of it because they look super uncomfortable because they're trying to figure out how to be a new thing, and so it takes it's really a painful thing to do. And so they get trained really hard. And now, I will recommend, and I don't know if it's changed, maybe they've relaxed, but I will recommend Salesforce is probably the best to watch their keynotes, not because they're particularly interesting, because I don't even know what they're talking about. I mean, I streamed them for 10 years and I don't understand that product. But what I will tell you is those presenters have memorized every word and they know everything about it. And there's some notes there for them to follow, as you'll sometimes see in the returns, but wow. Like, it was amazing to watch them on stage, because when they were rehearsing this incredible, they were just projecting that out. Now, for a typical prep where we don't get to do that, where we get people on the day of the event, the big thing that's important to us is to make sure that we're prepped. So we have a technical rehearsal, oftentimes for up to an hour or more, where we get all of our stuff figured out. And I literally hire actors to come in. So I hire stand-in actors for a couple hours to come in and they will all sit there, and they're the same gender, race, everything. Like, we try to match everything up to where it's going to look the same, so we can figure out our lighting. Depending on how big the event is, we look at height and all kinds of other things. And we try to get that so that we can rehearse it. And rehearse. Now, what we're doing is making sure that the mics work, and make sure that the camera angle work, and make sure that the lighting works. We don't want to do that with talent. We don't even want to do that with the moderator there. So we get that all working until it's running really well. Then we bring the moderator in, and the moderator will rehearse with us. But now we know exactly how this works. We know what the things are. They're not watching us figure out how to do it. We're just listening to the moderator and having them tell us what makes them comfortable. And then we make those final tweaks, and then we do the event, and a lot of times with like actors and stuff, we don't get any time, but we want to make sure that the entire environment, we know how it should work all the time before we bring in the talent. And I will say that bringing in actors for stand-ins for technical, we started doing it maybe a decade ago, and it makes a huge difference. It just means that you're not taking away all your PAs And PAs are horrible at sitting there because they don't know what to say. This isn't their job. They're not actors. Some of them are in LA. Some of them are, but generally they're not ready to. And it makes a difference on how you frame things and do things and so on and so forth. Comedians, by the way, comedian actors are the best because they're really good at improv. You just tell them stuff, and the hardest part is that all the folks start laughing because if they're good, we put all comedians in there, and it's just the funnest thing to work on because they're all telling funny stories and being absurd and talking about the subject, but being really absurd about it. Anyway.
All right, fantastic. And I think it's been said that shows never finish; you just run out of time for them. So thank you for that, and appreciate your comment there, Rajan. In the chat, I share your sentiment. Yeah, some of these can be very exclusive to benefit from the training. Let's go to our next question.
Craig McFarlane in Boston comes up and says, I want to secure a camera mount to a maker pipe frame, but allow vertical adjustments. Any recommendations for parts?
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, what I would do, it depends on how big the camera is. So the one thing about the maker frame is that EMT will take a clamp, but not a lot of clamp. Like if you clamp it too hard, it's just going to kink. So think about something that's going to have a lot of area. So what I would probably approach that with is a cardellini and a long cardellini. So a long cardellini is going to go along that edge, and it's going to let you tighten it up. And so I would have it be a solid 6 inches long cardellini that's going to be there, and it's going to give you a pin. And on that pin, I would connect a magic arm. Like a magic arm and a cardellini will let you grab onto that. It may, the only problem you're going to have is that it still may want to rotate a little bit. So you got to kind of figure out, where it actually looks, where it wants to go there. The only other thing you may want to do is inside of that maker pipe is go vertical, connect 2 maker pipes vertically and grab onto it sideways. And then it's going to tend to not want to twist like this. It'll just go if you're going up and down vertically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a similar suggestion. So there is a hack that MakerPipe made, known in the little bike adjustment, like you use to screw down your seat. If you use that in one of their T fittings, what you can do is you can open it, adjust it, and move it. What this might help you out with, if you wanted more than just a camera, the whole platform to move up and down, it's kind of a unique thing you can do with the MakerPipe. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, in the world of show and tell, I got a camera bracket, and if you look at it closely, you can probably see what it does. Here's where the camera would go, and here's where you would clamp it to the maker pipe. This is obviously a small one, and for a small camera, but as Alex says, you could use a super clamp and then a magic arm, and you'd be good.
And
I just want to say one thing: I would not use a super clamp I would not use a super clamp on a. I think you'll kink it if you tighten it too much. I would use a cardellini, which is a very different grab.
Yeah, and then you can do different pipe, but if you're using EMT, what Alex said, you got to watch the clamp force on those. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, as Alex said, it's a cardellini or a mathellini to give you that less pound per square inch, so you don't over tighten it with a super clamp and just have that kink in the pipe. But here is that magic arm, and there is one called the 244 from Manfrotto that includes the camera plate, so you get the 1/4-20 here, and then you can adjust, left, right, up, down, 360 degrees. So you got a ball here that you can adjust, and then when you tighten this one, it tightens everything all at once. So it's called a variable friction arm, or we call them magic arms.
And Courtney, real quick.
Yeah, the magic arm gives you the most flexibility. The other possibility is just get a monopod and flip it upside down, put it a cardellini up there. It depends on how tall your grid is above your head. So you get a monopod that collapses down to about 24 inches or so. Then you'll have up to 6 feet of adjustment height-wise, and then left-right on the cardellini on the cross pipe. So that can give you XY dimension changes, but not Z, which the magic arm will give you the Zs.
There you go, Craig. Let's go on to our next question.
Harshid Trivedi, Daytona Beach. As far as accessibility goes, the StreamDeck may work for some, but I heard there was a tactile keyboard-driven solution. What's the name, and has anyone used it before?
Guy?
I haven't seen one that works with the StreamDeck itself. Besides, we just became an Elgato reseller, and so I picked up one of these, which is the 3-button foot pedal, and it's one in the center.
Yes,
Whoops.
and it mutes him
I
very
accidentally
well.
muted myself on that one. Sorry. I don't remember which part I was at, but basically you get 3 buttons. I have them all 3 set for mute because I was trying to figure out which one I wanted to use and wound up using them all. But yeah, $89 for the the StreamDeck foot pedal. But yeah, I don't know of one that works with the StreamDeck software that is tactile, because on the StreamDecks themselves, there are no, like on the JK, or if you're a traditional typist on a keyboard, you get those little nubs on the F and on the J. There are no little nubs on these, so you kind of just got to get a feel for them. So that's why I like the smaller one here, because I could kind of feel, 1 through 4 is about as big as my finger will go with this pop socket on the thing. So I hold it like this, and then I'm able to feel 3 up and 4 across, all with one hand.
Yeah, I might hit you up, Harshit, maybe later in after hours about what's the best thing to maybe put on the StreamDeck to have a little bump that you can feel for a home finger on. So
Elmer's
I'll catch up with
glue.
you later.
It's
There you go.
removable.
And our final question.
Joe McDonald from Vallejo, California, comes back to ask, what are the price ranges? Now he's having to comment regarding teleprompters or microphones.
Had so much discussion that now we're curious about the price. Alex?
It's Ojwa. Ojwa is a friend of mine, so Ojwa is the name there. I think that the prices I would say from all of these, well, the microphone, I would say between $15 and about $15,000 is the range, and the teleprompter is probably about $100 to about, I don't know, $8,000. Is that about right, Courtney?
Yeah, if you're just the camera mount, you can get them up to about $4,000 to $5,000 for a good camera mount that's adjustable and 15-inch and has good glass and contains a monitor that is a 15-inch monitor that takes SDI or composite video. It can get up to be about $5,000 to $15,000. But cheap ones, down in the $400 or $500 range. So.
Well, thank you for our panel, for being such a wealth of knowledge. Thank you for our producers for giving us questions and topics to talk about. And thank you for our support. Every day we're improving and increasing our range, and our production looks fantastic. Again, if you'd like to participate, go to officehours.global and join our community. Now we'll go to After Hours.
That uncomfortable, just waiting for it to go. Josh is trying to hold that frame. Good job, Josh.
Almost there.
Almost there.
Almost there.
Slowly fade to black.
Is it over yet?
Just an idea. What if we do this again tomorrow? And tomorrow. And tomorrow.
Are you talking about every day, including
Sundays?
Crazy.
Every day.
That's crazy. We should definitely not do that.
Crazy.
We need to rest. We need to think about